All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call today's regular council meeting to order at 10 o'clock. At this time, I'd like to remind committee members and members of the public in attendance that all committee and council meetings are recorded. Please note that these recordings may capture comments made during meetings or in breaks or recesses. Recordings will be available to the public on the municipal YouTube channel for members to view. The public may also attend the open session of this meeting in person in the municipal council chambers. Please mute all electronic devices during the meeting. Now I'd ask everyone to rise for the national anthem. Now I'll read the First Nations land acknowledgement. As we gather today, I would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We'd like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history. We're extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Yeah, I do have a recommendation to adopt the agenda. The recommendation is that the regular council meeting agenda for March 18th, 2025 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Schulis, second by Councillor Micah. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? None here. All right, seeing none. I do not have a mayor's address today, so we now move into delegations and presentations. And the first one, we're fortunate to have Judy Micah here, and it's the estate of Robert Micah, transfer of the gravel pit permit located on Highway 62, Combermere Road. Do you want to read the recommendation and then have some discussion? Okay, so I will read the recommendation, and that's the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley hereby accept the transfer of permit of the gravel pit, permit number 606261, identified as part of Lot 5, Concession 11 and 12 in the geographic township of Radcliffe, Highway 62, Combermere Road. And so could I get a mover on that one? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion? None here. Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. So that's carried unanimously. And I would like to thank you very, very much, Judy, on behalf of the township. Just like to say that in late fall 2024, the township was approached by Judy Micah regarding taking over the lease of gravel pit on Highway 62, Combermere Road. Council was informed of the opportunity and provided direction to staff to pursue the lease, and that they were interested in finalizing the process with Ms. Micah. We received confirmation from the ministry that the request for the lease transfer was approved and presented today to there is a recommendation to accept the final lease agreement, which we just did. We want to thank Judy Micah and acknowledge that this transaction is recognized as a gift from the estate of her late husband, Robert Micah. This gravel pit is for the betterment of the municipality and will provide ample opportunity for many years to come. Many, many thanks. We really, really appreciate it. It really, I think it does benefit the community, and it will continue to for many years ahead. Oh. Oh. Thank you. Yeah. And I believe you have a copy of the permit now? Yes, good. Yeah. Yes, we would like to have a picture. I know it's the last thing you want to do, but we need to do one.
Well, here, you can stand in front of me.
Take your moment of fame and glory.
Well, it's not about me.
Do it for Uncle Bobby. I really love it. Tickle ya.
Now she tells you that, right? Come here.
Marvin won't give you any more potatoes. Oh, one for Hillary. Thank you. Hillary did a lot of work on this.
I know he did.
Would there be a name on this?
We just call it the
Oh, yeah.
act our.
Yeah.
Very good. That's what I'm thinking.
I won't make the motion.
No,
just
no,
because
no,
of
but
the
I
conflict.
think we should,
If you'd like to make a motion that.
would it be good and appropriate to do it now?
Right now. I'll second. Oh. At this point, it's a gift, it's not conflict. I'll fight this one if I had to.
Yeah.
So to you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Schulis?
Just listen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, before you leave, Judy, I would like to make a motion that we rename, I know it's according to Councillor Micah that it has a name, but I'd like to see it renamed to the Robert Micah pit, or, I guess if that's okay with the council and that, so that's my
Second that
motion.
motion.
All right, we do have a motion. You've heard it. All in favor of that name change? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Judy.
And Judy, do you want to, when we ever go into that pit, do you want to drive the loader and do the first bucket of sand? Sure. Okay. Hillary, you call me, Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a second delegation, and we have Tyler Peters here with us from Greenview Environmental Management. And this is regarding the blue box recycling and producer responsibility. So, Tyler, I'll turn it over to you.
Bear with me while I get the presentation
Okay.
set up here.
Just give it a minute then.
Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, good. Great. So while the slides are being pulled up, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council and staff for having me today. We've been working with the Township's ad hoc committee on recycling with respect to the province's change in blue box recycling management overall. I have prepared some slides for my presentation today just to kind of guide the discussion. the process, and we'll get into that as it relates to the slides. The process has been extensive for the whole Blue Box producer responsibility program. So one of the benefits that the township has is that you're in the position of one of the very few at the end that transitioned directly into what is referred to as a post-transition phase. So a lot of municipalities across Ontario, including larger urban centers, have gone through this transition phase per se, but for you, you're actually heading directly into post-transition as of January 1st. So just have some slides. Just next slide, please. Just a little bit about us again. For council, we have been in business for 20 years. This is our 20th year. Hard to believe. And we're just based just down the road out of Hastings Highlands, just north of Bancroft. We've been working in the environmental and sustainability sector for all 20 of those years, and have recently kind of morphed our business to include municipal infrastructure and asset management, including buildings and site development and that kind of thing. So throughout that process, all 20 of our years, we've been focused on small rural municipalities. That's our business, that's our connection, and we're super happy to be with you today. Next, please. So just a quick presentation outline. I'm going to try not to bore you with all the specifics of the background of producer responsibility. I want to hit on some key concepts and terms. We're going to talk a little bit about material sources, so eligible sources of recycling, as well as non-eligible. We'll talk a little bit about the timeline, and primarily 2025 is your timeline for this township. We'll speak about some of the transition work that's already underway that commenced in 2024, and then look at some next steps. So next, please. So who are the players? So some of these names you're going to be familiar with. So you may recall a group called Stewardship Ontario. Stewardship Ontario is in the process of winding down its operations in 2025 and has effectively been replaced by Circular Materials, or CM. Okay, Circular Materials has been retained as effectively an agency that is implementing the Blue Box transition process based on legislation. The current local contractor that's been retained by Circular Materials to do Blue Box management on the residential level is Miller Waste Systems. And that wasn't decided until mid to late last year for our local catchment area. And it was one of the last awards across the province, unfortunately, and has left a lot of municipalities, certainly in Renfrew County, with a little bit of catch up. So this township is also in that realm, but again, as I mentioned to you, and I'll talk more about, is the transition period or timeline is at the end of the year. So it does provide you with some freeboard moving through the rest of 2025 in preparation. You likely have heard of the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, or REPRA. They are the entity, used to be Waste Diversion Ontario. Waste Diversion Ontario was replaced by REPRA. They're again the enforcement group with respect to legislation as it pertains to Blue Box transition, and they're active in all levels of recycling and materials. So not just Blue Box, also tires, waste electronics, hazardous waste. So they're the overarching kind of agency on behalf of the province. And I do want to note the benefits and the importance of a group called CIF, or the Continuous Improvement Fund. This is a group that's been around for, I believe, approximately 15 years, and they have been instrumental in assisting municipalities through the Blue Box transition process over the last number of years. They have wound down their own services in terms of funding and their operations as of the end of last year. I do want to acknowledge them and their staff and their groups. Now, some of those folks, of course, have gone on to other roles, independent or private otherwise, but they have provided a lot of background information and support to municipalities through this process. You will note in my slides that I have selected some of their slides right out of their templates, okay? So I just want to talk a little bit about the background. You see in this particular slide, on the left, originally we were looking at what we've been operating with for the most part over the past 20 years is shared funding. So municipalities have been burdened with 50% of the cost of managing recycling, even though the province implemented this in 1994. At that time it was 100% on municipalities. So we're back to the 50% cost sharing. Now with the extended producer responsibility, we're at 100% of those costs are being borne by producers on the residential side, okay? On the residential side only. So that's been the same. The 50-50 split was also 50% to residential. Municipalities or generators from our commercial and industrial and institutional sectors have been responsible for those costs throughout, okay? In terms of legislative framework, on the next slide, just quickly, 10194 is the regulation originally that came through, and I refer back to this. I remember cleaning out glass jars and taking paper labels off those jars when it first came out with my mother. And then through the shared responsibility element, where we're looking at shared cost and shared responsibility with our producers through the Waste Diversion Act. And then REPRA came into play. And then with REPRA coming in, they have been the entity that's kind of pushed forward with extended producer responsibility. And I know for those of you that have an eye for this stuff, this process has been going on for likely 8 years. But it's finally been implemented with the new legislation in 21. And we're just finishing up the transition process for Ontario municipalities. So on my next slide, just quickly, just looking at the types of things that we would consider to be producers. Effectively, they're anyone that produces packaging for a product, okay? So when we go to the grocery store, when we go to the hardware store, wherever we go to purchase something and it has packaging, as long as that packaging is defined under the legislation, that material that is left over after you take your product is, on the residential side, is to be managed by our producer responsibility organizations, or our pros. Those pros are managed by Circular Materials. There's one entity, and CM, Circular Materials, is the group that has been provided the responsibility to manage those materials. Again, CM will retain subcontractors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few future slides, but they're effectively that entity. On the next slide, just quickly about the transition period, and I just provide this to you as information for council. Again, the transition process, for the most part, most municipalities in Ontario were involved in the transition process. It started on July 1st of 23 with our larger centers, Toronto, Ottawa, Windsor. So the larger communities across Ontario were involved in the initial transition phases, right through to the end of transition. So the last group of municipalities to transition includes Madawaska Valley, and that's on December 31st of this year. So in essence, you don't have a transition. You're moving straight into what is going to be the new way of managing blue box recycling for residential, okay? So post-transition is the other term. So just in case you're talking to other municipalities and they're speaking about how much fun their transition process has been, post-transition is January 1st. So that is what Madawaska Valley is looking to. We're working this year to get you completely ready, fully organized towards that transition process. And in that case, again, CM and their group, in this case Miller Waste, etc., will be in a position to manage your blue box recycling for residential as of January 1st and thereafter. Okay. On the next slide, just quickly on on funding, originally we had, and this is consistent depending on your service provider, but each municipality kind of had its own list of materials, right? So Madawaska Valley on your calendar, you have your list of approved materials, right? Your neighbor may not have the same list of materials. The legislation has fixed that. So the legislation specifically identifies the materials that are to be accepted, and that is across the province effectively, okay? So that new legislation, as we go through the process of transition, you'll now have one set of materials. It is 2 streams. So containers and fibers is kind of the 2 streams. Cardboard is considered a fiber, whether it's managed separately or not. That's specific to how we negotiate with your service provider. Excuse me. But the key point is you have a standard set of materials to be managed. On the next slide, just looking at eligible communities, and again, we don't have to get too far into this, but eligible sources are important. So eligible communities primarily are any community across Ontario, including First Nations. Those have been brought forward as part of the eligible community designation. Our eligible sources, again, in the legislation it defines, but it's specifically looking at residential. So not just individual dwellings, but also multi-residential. Anything residential in nature that isn't institutional is considered an eligible source for the material and falls under the legislation. Okay. So just to go back to the transition plan and touch on that, I won't get into all the specifics, but effectively you're looking at transitioning as of the end of the year into January 1st. The tentative plan for the township, working with the ad hoc committee, and this is consistent with most smaller municipalities in Ontario, is that you're looking at the term, what's called opting out. So your curbside collection of your residences in Barry's Bay, so your collection area, curbside, for blue box recycling only, not garbage, not organics. That is planned to be opted out. Now this has to be confirmed by council, but the current plan we're working with the ad hoc committee, is opting out so that effectively Miller Waste would collect all of your blue box recycling from each of your residential locations. And that's done at their cost. That's part of the process. There's no cost to the township, which of course would translate into a savings. And then we're looking at opting in for your 3 depot sites. So operating the waste transfer stations, or they're called depot sites, impacts the overall waste management. Eligible sources, and I touched on this earlier. The eligible versus non-eligible sources is important, and I want to spend a little bit of time just presenting that to you today. As of December 31st, which is your transition date, all of your residential and multi-residential type of buildings will be serviced under the legislation, okay? Non-eligible sources, so other buildings that aren't included in that, are not going to be serviced as of January 1st. Again, on this slide, it's a little bit confusing because if you're transitioning, for example, KHR is transitioning on July 1st, for the second half of the year, they have collection during the transition period that is also going to include non-eligible sources. I do not want to confuse council with that. So you're not in that position. You're transitioning at the end of the year, and you're moving right into a full transition as of January 1st. So as of January 1st, your eligible sources will be collected or managed. As of January 1st, on the next slide, your non-eligible sources will not. So your non-eligible sources are excluded from the legislation and the extended producer responsibility process. So also as part of our work plan, working with the ad hoc committee, we are evaluating methods in which we can manage your non-eligible sources, okay? So non-eligible sources include industrial, commercial properties, not-for-profits, places of worship, daycares, your municipal buildings, campgrounds, commercial farms. Those are all not eligible as they fall under the legislation. So on the next slide, it also includes things like daycares and buildings like that. So that is a group that generates waste within the municipality. It generates recycling within the municipality, and is something that we are evaluating as the ad hoc committee to understand how best to manage that. Okay, so on the next slide, kind of looking at what your alternatives are, and again, we're focused on the January 1st date. Your alternatives in managing these materials, we really have a do nothing option, and that is done by some municipalities where they basically say, as of January 1st, we are hands off. And it's up to you as a business or as a daycare, as a place of worship, to manage your recycling as you see fit. Okay? You also have a fee for service option, and I know that the township has a fee for service arrangement with certain businesses already. That is another alternative that we're looking at, and what that should be. The service itself, be it whether it's collected by the township and your operations as it has been in the past, whether there's a cooperation between entities and things like that, those are the alternatives and options that we're looking at with the ad hoc committee now, to better understand that. The other element, so whether it be the township or a service provider, so in this case, there may be the option where Miller Waste may be interested in also servicing your non-eligible sources, but they are not obligated to do that at this time. We are, again, another alternative and option we're looking at as part of the studies we're doing now. The last one is kind of a broader range, and that is a cooperative opportunity, and that is to look at a series of municipalities in our area that might want to get together and do a cooperative procurement process, kind of the economies of scale option, and that's on my next slide. The concept or the theory of economies of scale, if we can get a number of municipalities and increase the number of stops effectively with respect to these materials, we can likely reduce the cost per stop. Okay, so opportunities and benefits with that, we look at improved buying power as a group. We look at terms and conditions that better suit, because we need flexibility between the different municipal partners. And this is a process that has been done in the past. Okay, we actually, as Greenview, worked with Madawaska Valley in 2011 and went through this process with a number of municipalities. You'll see a little graphic in the bottom right. That was the cover sheet for the previous effort we did here. And I think there were 6 municipalities that went through that process. At that time, it wasn't successful. We did receive a bid, but it wasn't feasible. The reality is that whole landscape has changed. So now you have active companies that are looking for this kind of thing. There are tenders out there, or just closing. Some are closing now, where folks have tried this process. We have initiated this as part of our work plan with Brudenell, Lindock, and Raglan, Killow, Haggerty, Richards, and North Algona Wilberforce. We've had an introductory meeting a couple weeks ago, and we're about to pick that back up and take next steps as we move forward. So just so council is aware, we are looking at options and alternatives to best serve ratepayers, both residential and your businesses. So on my next slide, just a quick summary where we are. Again, this presentation was to get council in the know. So Blue Box recycling services in the township will change as of January 1st. We'll have curbside collection is the intention. There'll be curbside collection in Barry's Bay. The expectation is that will be done by your service provider. If council does confirm opting out of your curbside collection at your 3 depot sites, your transfer stations, if council does decide to go ahead with a depot operations agreement where the township staff and operations continue to operate effectively what you have and be paid for it, that would be opting in to a depot operations agreement. So that is anticipated to be, of course, part of the process we work through together in 2025. We do need to have a solution for non-eligible sources and how to manage those within the township. So that could include garbage and organics, okay? Specifically, so there are opportunities there through the transition to study that and understand what the best options would be for council in moving forward. And as I mentioned earlier, work is underway on all of those elements now as part of our current work plan with the ad hoc committee. And we're prepared to provide an update in the coming weeks when we have time to work through the findings of what those studies come out with the ad hoc committee and then recommendations to council for decisions. Okay. So on my next steps, on the next slide, we're working right now to establish an overall baseline for recycling materials. So you have great data. You've been responsible in reporting to the WDO data call year after year after year. So that generates great data for us. Your finance department has great information in terms of their general ledger details, so we can use that in terms of cost management. And it's you know, Amanda keeps things very up to date and current, so she's already shared 2024 numbers, so we have those already and we can work with those moving ahead instead of 2023. We are looking to evaluate and consider more detailed non-eligible sources, as I mentioned. So our businesses, our IC&I sector and things like that, how best to manage those. And that gets fed into the studies that we're working with as well. We anticipate in the coming weeks to have, after meeting with the ad hoc committee, be able to present recommendations, be it the committee would be presenting those with respect to next steps and decisions to be made with respect to recycling, as well as other elements of Blue Box and larger recycling management for the township. There is, of course, our element of promotion and education. So with the change, it is absolutely critical that we promote and educate our ratepayers, residential, commercial, what have you, with respect to the changes. And there is funding through REPRA for that process. So Hillary has already made it very clear that that's really important, that our calendar gets carried forward and is clear. And this is actually something our firm was developed with the township back in the waste management strategic plan days. So we're familiar with the benefits of it, and it's still, I'm glad it's still working well for you. And then as we move towards the end of this year, Circular Materials will be presenting the township with agreements. So you actually enter into agreements, signed agreements, in particular with respect to the depot operations agreement at your 3 transfer sites. That is something that comes kind of towards the end. The promotion education work also has an agreement to it as well. The challenge with these is that they are constantly being tweaked and evolving. So yours, with respect to both elements, maybe more towards the depot operations side, will likely come out very close to the end of the year. So we are chasing Circular Materials as we speak, with respect to making sure everything is in order for the township, because again, you were involved as being one of the last transitioners, and some of the support that the ad hoc committee has moved on. We want to make sure that Circular Materials has all the information they need to make this process easy for you, and that there are no gaps. So we don't have gaps in service. We don't have numbers of locations not being collected, what have you. Okay? So that is part of the process that we're working on as well behind the scenes to kind of get you caught up. So those are the slides I have today, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to answer any questions.
Can I just clarify one point? Just on.
Yeah, Councillor Micah.
Thanks. I just want to, when we talk about the depot operations, just to be clear, that Willer Mace Management will still be doing the trucking. We're just running what's happening on the ground, assuming we do that.
Right, so.
We're not, as we do now, hauling it to Pembroke.
Right.
That hauling aspect is over,
Right, so.
with regards to the eligible.
So good
Thank you.
question. Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So through a depot operations agreement, as Councillor Micah noted, the township is responsible to receive the materials as you do now. You manage on-site operations in terms of containers, waste screening, record keeping, all of those things that you do now. But the service provider, in this case it would be Miller Waste, is responsible for haulage, transportation, tipping fees, processing costs, anything to do with, as soon as their truck comes in to pick up that container, it's on them. Those costs are to them. So effectively, the township, under the standard depot operations agreement, gets paid for their labor and operational costs, so certain maintenance things and that. And there are formulas that CM uses to calculate those numbers. The good, again, another benefit to the township is that because you're near the end of the transition phase, there's a whole slew of information out there, again, from past CIF work, but other municipalities of similar size and operation and what they are getting paid to operate their facilities on behalf of CM. So yes, that cost for transportation, haulage, processing after it's removed from your site is completely not a cost to be borne by the township on the residential side. Again, we don't have a solution yet on the non-eligible IC&I side, but we're working on that.
All right. Councillor Blank.
Thank you. Interesting stuff, and I'm glad it's moving ahead. Thank you for all the work you've done with the ad hoc committees and everything too. Just for my own benefit and benefit of those listening in today, when you talk about non-eligible sources, so where do schools, hospital, long-term care, where do they come under? Eligible or uneligible?
In general, through you, Mr. Chair, in general, those are non-eligible sources. So to not dig into the specifics of the legislation, there's actually specific definition for each one of those.
Okay.
And what we will do, we're applying the legislation specific to the township and what each one of those addresses might be. So with respect to healthcare or that kind of thing, those are generally considered non-eligible.
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Even doctors' offices, dentists' offices, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Being clinical in that way. However, a senior's residence or a multi-residential location, which you have a few here in the township, of course, those are considered residential and eligible.
Okay.
So we need to define those specifically. One of the key ways to define that is to work directly with Miller Waste in this case as a subcontractor to Circular Materials, because they have the information, they've already bid and been contracted to service you, and we want to make sure there are no discrepancies between what you have and what they are expected to serve. That's what we're trying to do right now, is get that information from them, because they have bid and entered into a contract with CM to service the township. We want to make sure there are no gaps. And we have heard on the negative side, there are always opportunities for gaps. On the positive side, Miller Waste has certainly expressed interest in working with each one of their townships, each one of their clients, to resolve any of those potential gaps and make sure that there are no issues moving forward. So we're actively pursuing that now.
Okay.
Councillor Blank.
Just one other item too. When you talked about the Nest cooperative procurement, and it had been, looked at previously and worked on with the other municipalities in our area, because we are so rural, all of this end, where you state Madawaska Valley, Haggerty Richards, Lyndoch, Bonjour Valley, like we're all at the far end of everywhere. So the cost of working together on these small rural roads and stuff like that would be enormous, would it not? Would that not be a major impact on that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, excellent question. That is part of the driver towards doing this process. So if we have, just for example, if a service provider is coming with their blue box recycling truck for a day and they service the township and they have half of a truck full, so half of their recycling truck is empty, before they head back, would it not make sense for them possibly to hit one or two urban communities in the western end of Renfrew County to fill up their truck to make it worth the trip? So those are the kinds of things we're looking at from kind of the multiple service or dual service approach. Are there opportunities in giving even your current service provider, being Miller Waste, an opportunity to look at the non-eligibles, however they want to do it? We're not too worried about that.
Okay.
The fact is that the municipality is getting the best fee for service, the best cost management you can get, but you're also being able to, in some ways, serve your ratepayers to the best of your ability. So you're right about the isolation and the rural factor, but there is an opportunity there for perhaps someone like Miller Waste or MTerra or any other service provider that's in the area to possibly take advantage of those smaller locations. If we had only one township and your rural locations, I would think that would be less beneficial to three or four.
Right.
So they have the flexibility as to how they want to manage that, and there could be some significant opportunities for cost reduction. There is, just to further to that point, there is kind of an understanding over the past couple of years that the cost for dealing with non-eligible sources is significantly higher than the eligible source costs, because it wasn't included in the tendering process and it's considered to some extent an additional service. So across the province, municipalities are seeing significant costs for those non-eligible source elements, like managing those materials. So if we can get more economies of scale, that theory, if we can have more opportunity, more material, more flexibility to a service provider, then we're hoping we would see some of those cost benefits.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Sue?
Just a few clarification questions. So you referenced that there's funding available through the ARPA for education. Do we have to wait till we transition, or is that something that's available now? And if it is, can you send us a link to that?
So there, through you, Mr. Chair, there is an agreement through Circular Materials. They have their own P&E department.
Okay.
So we have to confirm eligibility with respect to the township in terms of what you are able to access in terms of that funding. As part of the work we're doing now is they have a designated individual that coordinates that. In particular, if you've already gotten or established a calendar, this is specifically something they're looking for. So they want to use existing templates and things like that, and then you can build from there based on the new changes coming. So that is already underway, just in terms of initial contact. We would want to have a presentation from Circular Materials at our next ad hoc committee meeting, which was what I'm trying to organize. The representative is on vacation currently, and as we set a date for our ad hoc committee, it would be nice to have that person presenting, and if not, we can share that information to them. But there are specific agreements to that effect.
Right.
Continue,
Another
Sue.
question, just so the ad hoc committee, so I understand we will be coming back with a formal recommendation, opt into what, opt out of what. Are we expecting that to be in April or in May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a fair bit of work to be specifically on your eligible elements. That is the work that we're currently focused on to start, which is kind of where the introductory presentation comes from today. We're working on studies now that are somewhat outside of that in terms of the overall blue box transition and how it's going to affect recycling. I would say it's reasonable, subject to the content and what's involved in that likely have our ad hoc committee. I would think at this point in April, that's only a week or so away.
Yeah, well, don't rush it.
Yeah.
We-
No,
this
no,
is-
that's why I'm asking.
It's not a rush for a
I
meeting.
think, I would think later in April, when we have numbers, what's important is that we want to have, for those kind of internal discussions, to have the right numbers. So we're working with the finance department to review those. I had a quick chat with Amanda this morning, just to work through how that all fits. I've met with operations staff about some of the alternatives and scenarios that we discussed at our previous meeting and what those could entail. So there is some work still to do. I would say safely would be May, but I'm thinking earliest would be late April.
Okay, I don't want you to rush this. We need the
All right,
information.
are there any other questions
I
from
I just want
council?
to clarify one thing.
Councillor Micah,
We- we're
through the
talking-
chair, please.
Sorry, Mark, we're talking about Miller Waste Management. I just want it to be very, very clear to the residents that the township had zero say in that. We did not go out to tender. This was done at the provincial level. Am I correct on the provincial level? That they, or all of these different agencies, but we were told this is who it's going to be, so we had no input in that.
That's correct through you, Mr. Chair. It's, with CM being the designated authority for producers, so REPRA to circular materials issued RFPs to service the entire province in different, what they called catchment areas. And then service providers bid, be it independently or as teams, however arrangement they went through, bid on certain areas and then been awarded different catchments across the province. So the township would have no, unless you were specifically working with one of those service providers, which the township did not do, very few did, then you would have no control over that process.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of council? Tyler, we were one of the last communities to start, which has some advantages, but we still have a fair amount to do. Do you feel our timelines are, that everything is good for the December 31st timeline to have everything completed?
Absolutely,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. So one of the benefits is that we know what is coming in terms of the residential side of things. We also have a strong sense of what's going to be expected with respect to the depot operations agreement. So that's coming as well. But it's the elements in between. We have non-eligible source side of things to sort through. We have the impacts to the overall recycling program, not just residential blue box that we're looking at, and how does that fit? So we're looking at those elements to extend on the side. The non-eligible source material is an important thing that has been overlooked by many municipalities as they've transitioned, and they've been caught with a significant cost surprise. We're trying to get way ahead of that. Now, that isn't to say that the cooperative opportunity may work. That isn't to say that. But what it is at least we'll have information to know whether it's really an alternative that council wants to consider. And there's similar interest certainly at Kilua Hegarty Richards to look at that as well. So that really comes into play on January 1st. Okay? So.
No, and I appreciate all the work you've done on this, Tyler, and working with the committee and Hillary's work too. And I just, there's a lot being accomplished. We certainly couldn't have done it without your help and assistance. My worry still is the NES, as you said, but it seems like you've got some strategies in hand, and I look forward to seeing it develop over the next 7-8 months.
Thank you.
Councillor Schulis.
To you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have one question. When do we have to make a decision of we opt out or opt in?
Through you, Mr. Chair, effectively those decisions were made in some ways for you. So if with respect to if you're going to do your own curbside collection, there was a requirement for the township to report on that interest prior to the RFPs being issued. So this is 23, 22 perhaps. So the decision with respect to curbside collection has already been made. And again, what you have done or the position you're in is consistent with most small municipalities that have focused curbside collection. Okay. With respect to the depot operations agreement, you effectively need to make that decision before you sign the agreement.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay? Because if you opt out of providing depot operations, you basically stand back and Circular Materials comes in and figures out how they're gonna manage your material, be it at your sites or not. They're your sites. They're not their sites. So they're your properties, and there's an advantage for you to continue that service to your ratepayers, because finally, you might actually get paid for it. You will get paid for it under your agreement.
We're hoping, yeah.
Councillor Micah?
And through you, and as we discussed at the meetings, it's because it's our property. And then there's liability factors, and it's not only that we're receiving blue box materials there, we're receiving a lot of other things. So our staff managing those sites controls what's going in and where it's going. And the kicker, I guess, to this is we've got the bins, everything is there now. This particular, the eligible material would be separated away in a separate bin from the non-eligible. So again, someone needs to be there controlling that process, that if business, A drives in with their, thing of garbage and recycling, somebody needs to say, oh, you're commercial, that goes over there. Your residential, that goes, so it's, there's, at least at the beginning, who's to say over time, but I think that's definitely the most beneficial way to deal with it.
All right. Well, once again, Tyler, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And it was a good presentation, very concise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great seeing you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Shane, Tyler.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 8.1, the public meeting minutes from March 4th on page 37 to 39. We do have a recommendation that the public meeting minutes for March 4th, 2025 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. Any discussion on these minutes?
None.
Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Item 8.2 is the council and committee meeting minutes for March 4th, 2025. Again, we have a recommendation that the council and committee meeting minutes for March 4th, 2025 be approved as presented. I need a mover, please. Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Micah. Any discussion? Councillor Blank.
Yes, just on two items, and I had already sent their comments to Brittany regarding the minutes for the fire department regarding my question as to whether charging stations would be a problem for EV and the fire department. And at that time, I think the request is that Corwin come up with a report back to council as to where their charging stations are within the area and if they're equipped to assist in helping them out. So that is there. Also, when it came to discussions regarding the replacement of the former councillor's position, I had asked CAO the question as to can we go ahead with our option and then partway through change our option? And the response was yes. So I'd like that continued to put in the meeting. It was already reported in the press, but not in our minutes. So I think it's important for that to do. And Brittany mentioned that, yes, those will be done. So thank you.
Okay, Sue?
You would have to do a friendly amendment that they be approved as amended.
Okay. All right, so we will change that. Could I get a mover to recommend that we
through the chair,
Yeah.
so Councillor Schulist and Councillor Micah moved and seconded. If they're
Okay,
in
if
agreement
you're
to
in
just say as
agreement-
amended.
Yes.
With the friendly amendment? Yep. You're fine?
Thank you.
All right, so with that, all in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8.3, special council meeting minutes, March 7th, 2025. Recommendation is that the special council meeting minutes for March 7th, 2025 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion on these minutes?
None.
Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Business arriving from the minutes. We do have some items. We'll start with 9.1, Ministry of Environment, Conservation Parks, letter, Pog Lake Waste Disposal Site. And we have a recommendation, and I'm going to ask the CAO to read this out, please.
Thank you. 4 annual monitoring reports for the Township of Madawaska Valley's Pog Lake Waste Disposal Site. And whereas the site historically operated as a domestic landfill under Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, Environmental Compliance Approval, ECA, number A413402, and whereas the site has been closed to all waste disposal and transfer operations since February 2004 and has been formally capped in accordance with the MECP approved closure plan. And whereas Pinchin Limited has recommended from the results of their 2024 monitoring plan program, which requires MECP approval, that the annual post-closure groundwater and surface water monitoring and reporting for the Pog Lake closed waste disposal site be discontinued following MECP approval, as the quantified down gradient exceedances are limited to non-health related matters such as alkalinity, hardness, iron, and manganese, and do not appear to be derived from the former waste deposits. And that upon receipt of approval of the discontinuance of the monitoring program from the MECP, the monitoring wells should be decommissioned in accordance with Ontario Reg 903, and that based on Pinchin's opinion, the final cover at the site is adequate, and Pinchin recommends that annual inspections and maintenance as required of the final cap continue to be completed to ensure the integrity of the cap, and that the Township of Madawaska Valley should continue to ensure that all other requirements as specified in the ECA are complied with, and finally, that the Council of the Township of Madawaska Valley does hereby acknowledge and endorse the recommendations by Pinchin Limited for the Pog Lake Waste Disposal Site and authorize to submit this resolution along with the MECP 2024 Pog Lake Site Letter completed by Pinchin to the MECP for approval.
Thank you, Sue. You've heard the recommendation. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Micah, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion?
Can I,
Councillor Micah.
so when I read through this, I would ask that I'll just read it through, so under the, and finally that. Got this, Brittany? The Council of the Township of Madawaska Valley does hereby acknowledge and strongly, to add the word strongly, endorse the recommendations by Pinchin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Picking up, authorized to submit this resolution along with the MECP 2024 Pog Lake Site Letter completed by Pinchin to the MECP for urgent approval. Can we add those two words? And that would be for all three of the ones coming forward. They're all worded in the same way. Can we make that a change?
Sue?
Thank you through the chair. I would ask that Councillor Micah and Councillor Schulis approve that friendly amendment to add to all 3 resolutions the words strongly and urgent.
Okay, are you in agreement?
Yes, please.
And
Yeah.
you're,
It's
okay.
Can't hurt, it can only help.
All right, so with that amendment, all in favor? That's carried. All right, 9.2, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP letter, Barry's Bay Waste Disposal Site. And again, I'll ask the CAO to read this.
Through the chair, whereas Pinchin Limited completed the 2024 annual monitoring reports for the Township of Madawaska Valley's Barry's Bay Waste Disposal Site. And whereas the site is operated under Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, Environmental Compliance Approval, ECA, number A413403. And whereas the site has been closed to all waste management operations since 1998 and has been finally capped in accordance with MECP approved closure plan. And whereas Pynchon Limited has recommended from the results of their 2024 monitoring program, which require MECP approval, that the annual post-closure groundwater and surface water monitoring and reporting for the Barry's Bay closed waste disposal site be discontinued, following MECP approval, as the qualified exceedances are limited to non-health related parameters such as iron, manganese, and TDS that do not appear to be solely derived from the former waste deposition activities. And that upon receipt of approval of the discontinuance of the monitoring program from the MECP, monitoring wells should be decommissioned in accordance with Ontario Reg 903, and that the Township of Madawaska Valley should continue to ensure that all other requirements as specified in the ECA are complied with. And finally, that the Council of the Township of Madawaska Valley does hereby strongly acknowledge and endorse the recommendations by Pynchon Limited for the Barry's Bay Waste Disposal Site, and authorize to submit this resolution along with the MECP 2024 Barry's Bay Site letter completed by Pynchon Limited to the MECP for urgent approval.
All right. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. Any further discussion on this?
No.
Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. All right, we move to Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, letter Wilno Waste Transfer. Once again, I'll ask the CEO to read the recommendation.
Through the chair, whereas Pynchon Limited completed the 2024 annual monitoring reports for the Township of Madawaska Valley's Wilno Waste Transfer Site, and whereas the site is operated under Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, Environmental Compliance Approval, ECA number A413401, for the transfer of municipal solid waste generated within the Township of Madawaska Valley, and whereas the site has been closed to waste disposal since 1997, and final closure activities were completed in September 2011, and whereas the site currently operates as a waste transfer station and all waste collected at the site is transferred to the Bark Lake Waste Disposal Site, which is an MECP approved waste disposal facility, with the exception of blue box recyclables and household organics, are transported directly from the site to the Ottawa Valley Waste Recovery Centre as necessary. And whereas Pynchon Limited has recommended from the results of their 2024 monitoring program, which require MECP approval, that given the site is a closed landfill utilized as a waste transfer station, whereby waste is only temporarily stored on site in bins prior to off-site disposal, the risk associated with the current site activities is minimal. And that as the site has now surpassed 25 years of post-closure monitoring, and the water quality and trends are well understood, it is recommended that the groundwater monitoring be discontinued following approval by the MECP. And that upon receipt of approval of the discontinuance of the monitoring program from the MECP, the monitoring wells should be decommissioned in accordance with Ontario Reg 903, and that transferred waste estimates should be included within the annual monitoring reports for the receiving site, i.e. the Bark Lake Waste Disposal Site, and that the Township of Madawaska Valley should continue to ensure that all other requirements as specified in the ECA are complied with. And finally, that the Council of the Township of Madawaska Valley does hereby acknowledge and strongly endorse the recommendations by Pynchon Limited for the Wilno Waste Transfer Site, and authorize to submit this resolution along with the MECP 2024 Wilno Site letter completed by Pynchon Limited to the MECP for urgent approval.
Thanks again, Sue. And again, I'll ask for a mover. Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Blank. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, and that's carried. All right, we'll now move into municipal reports. So the first one is information, and it's the Tariff Task Force County of Renfrew. The report is, as I said, to be received as information. Are there any comments, any discussion? Sue?
No, it's merely for council information, and again, to thank the County of Renfrew for taking the lead on this initiative, and they were very quick with a response and getting a meeting scheduled. We did receive, after the agenda was prepared, a council resolution from the County of Renfrew that will be brought to the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then we will
Sorry,
move.
no,
Okay,
I-
Councillor Micah.
I just had a note here, is this like an ongoing, was it one meeting or is this an ongoing?
No, they did contact all of, we weren't able to attend, we had a meeting that day. So to my knowledge, it's going to be an ongoing
Can
touch
we
point.
make sure that, the treasurer is included in these meetings too? Because I mean, it's gonna have to do with money, and so I think it's important that she participates in this.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so we do not have any standing committees. Move into the consent agenda. And these are consent agenda for support. And I believe we're going to move item 12.4 out of this and just into information items because the carbon tax has been, as we speak, removed on residential. And it continues to unfold on how that's going to go. So we will start. We have a letter and resolution, Heritage Advisory Committee, Municipality of South Huron, re-proposed amendment to subsection 27-16, Ontario Heritage Act 2024. I'll try to read this one, give Sue a break. The recommendation, whereas prior to the royal assent of the More Homes Built Faster Act 2022, subsection 29, brackets 1.2 of the Ontario Heritage Act provides council of a municipality the opportunity to give a notice of intent to designate a property within 90 days of a prescribed event. And whereas the More Homes Built Faster Act 2022 amended subsection 29's bracket 1.2 of the Ontario Heritage Act to provide that council may give notice of intention to designate a property only if the property is listed in the register under subsection 27 brackets 3 or predecessor of that subsection as the date of the prescribed event. And whereas the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley has noted concerns regarding this amendment limiting the authority of municipal councils to designate properties with the potential to undermine the effectiveness of heritage preservation efforts across the province. Now therefore be it resolved that Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley requests that the province reconsiders the amendment to subsection 29's bracket 1.2 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and finally that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the local MPP. Could I get a mover on this one? Councillor Micah, seconded by Councillor Blank. Any discussion?
Thank you, Brittany, for doing this.
Okay, all in favor? That's carried. I'll let you read this one. 12.3 is a resolution, Township of Pushlynch, federal and provincial call to action to buy Canadian, March 2025. And Sue?
Through the chair, whereas United States President Donald Trump continues to indicate that he will issue executive orders to impose tariffs on imports from Canada, and whereas these tariffs will have a significant detrimental impact on the economic stability in both countries, and whereas federal and provincial leaders are encouraging Canadians to buy Canadian, and whereas municipalities have significant purchasing power through capital and infrastructure programs, And whereas, according to data from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Ontario municipalities are expected to spend 250 to 290 billion on infrastructure in the next 10 years. And whereas municipalities have traditionally been prevented by trade agreements and legislation from giving preference to the purchase of Canadian products and services, and whereas municipalities can assist in the effort to combat tariffs and support businesses in the procurement for capital and infrastructure programs. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Madawaska Valley endorse the federal and provincial call to action to buy Canadian where and when possible, and that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley, federal and provincial governments work with municipalities on measures to protect Canadian consumers and businesses, and that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley hereby calls on the federal and provincial government to remove any impediments to municipalities preferring to engage Canadian companies for capital projects and supplies when appropriate and feasible. And finally, that this resolution be forwarded to the Prime Minister, Premier Doug Ford, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Okay, could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion? I think we all agree this is important. All in favor? Carried. So 12.4, we've moved to information items. 12.5, I'll give Sue a break. Resolution Town of Brantford West, Gwillimbury to request landlord-tenant reforms, March 2025. The recommendation is whereas Ontario has expanded the accessory dwelling unit ADU framework to address the housing supply crisis, which includes the need to balance the interests of both tenants and small-scale landlords, whereas small-scale landlords may have financial strain when tenants withhold rent in bad faith and delay dispute resolution systems and delayed dispute resolution systems can result in undue hardship for landlords while also affecting tenants' security and well-being, whereas it is crucial to support the development of legal ADUs and secondary rentals while ensuring tenants' rights are respected and upheld, whereas proposed reforms could include accelerating dispute resolutions for ADUs and secondary rentals at the Landlord and Tenant Board within 30 days, ensuring fairness for both tenants and landlords, introducing mediation services to resolve disputes quickly and amicably, reducing reliance on lengthy hearings, providing both landlords and tenants with enhanced tools for clear communication, such as standardized rental agreements and better screening practices, strengthening protections for tenants against unfair eviction while enforcing stricter penalties for tenants withholding rent in bad faith, ensuring law enforcement access to properties only under appropriate circumstances, respecting tenants' right while supporting landlords in the resolution of unpaid rent issues, establishing a hardship relief fund for landlords impacted by unpaid rent, while ensuring tenants are also supported in cases of financial distress, offering free or low-cost legal assistance to both landlords and tenants to navigate disputes fairly. Now therefore be it resolved that the Corporation of the Township Madawaska Valley Council requests the provincial government to look at ways to implement these balance reforms that protect both small-scale landlords and tenants, ensuring fairness in the rental market. And be it resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Premier Doug Ford, our local member of Provincial Parliament, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing to support the creation of a balanced protection for both landlords and tenants. Again, I'll ask for a mover. Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Micah. Any discussion on this one?
None.
Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. All right, so we now move into item 12.6, consent agenda for information items, and we have a recommendation, and we are amending it to add 12.4 to this also. So recommendation is that the items listed under the correspondence information items 12.4, 12.7 to 12.11 be approved by consent and be received by the corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley to be filed as information. Is everyone fine with leaving those all in information?
Yes.
All right, so I'll ask for a mover. Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. All in favor? That's carried. All right. We will now move into bylaws. Please note that bylaws 2025-16 and 2025-22 were deferred from the February 19th regular council meeting. So 13.1 bylaws 2025-16 adopt guideline for the procurement of goods and services. Recommendation is that bylaw 2025-16 being a bylaw to adopt guidelines from the procurement of goods and services be read a first, second, and third time and finally pass this 18th day of March 2025. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Blank. Seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. 13.2 bylaw bylaw 2025-22. The recommendation is that bylaw 2025-22 being a bylaw respecting construction, demolition, and change of use permits and inspections be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Schulis, second by Councillor Micah. All in favor? That's carried. Bylaw 2025-30, appoint a weed inspector. The recommendation is that bylaw 2025-30, being a bylaw to appoint a weed inspector for the corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Could I ask for mover again? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Agreement, First Amendment Agreement, Voter List Management Services, Comprint Services Incorporated, DataFix. The recommendation is that bylaw 2025-31 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a First Amendment to the Voter List Management Services Agreement with Comprint Systems Incorporated carrying business as DataFix be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Could I get a mover on this one? Councillor Micah, second by Councillor Schulis. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, bylaw 2025-32 ZBLA Hutter. Recommendation is that bylaw 2025-32 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2006-26 as amended of the Township of Madawaska Valley be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Again, I'll ask for a mover. Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. Any discussion?
No.
All in favor? That's carried. 13.6 is council remuneration. Recommendation is that bylaw 2025-33 being a bylaw to provide for the remuneration of members of council of the corporation of the Township Madawaska Valley for 2025 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Micah, seconded by Councillor Blank. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Bylaw 2025-34 SRA Palubeski. The recommendation is that bylaw 2025-34 being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up part of a shoreline road allowance be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Again, I need a mover. Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Blank. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Bylaw 2025-35 SRA Wallach. Recommendation that bylaw 2025-35 being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up part of a shoreline road allowance be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed this 18th day of March 2025. Again, I need a mover. Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Under new business, anything? Seeing none?
Can I?
Oh, yes, Councillor Micah.
I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I just wanted to acknowledge that there were, it's very sad right now for our community because there's 3 very well-known members of our community have passed away, more or less on the same day in this past weekend. And I wanted to send out my condolences. We don't normally do this, but three on the same day is kind of, it's a heavy burden for both the communities of Barry's Bay and Combermere. And I would like to send my condolences to the family and spouse of Chris Kelly, to the families and of Doc Yantha, and to the families of Lauren Marquette. These are very sad times this week. It's sad any time, but when it's 3 at once, it's very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Micah. Any other new business? All right, under unfinished business, I do want to just touch on the vacant council position and the process. I have talked to most of council, if not all of council, about how I see this moving forward, but we need to move it forward. It has to be done in open session. So what I would like to do is we did make a decision at the last council meeting that we would directly appoint, and we will be doing that. And I am proposing that we do it at the April 4th committee and council meeting, and we will have that on the agenda. It'll be open session, and so council will be free to nominate anyone of their choice for the council seat. So that's my comment. We're all good with that?
Through you, Mayor Wilmer, at the last council meeting, it was not, direction was not provided through a resolution. So if you possibly could have a resolution
Yes,
to do
we could do that,
That
yes.
would be great, thank you.
So we need to have one by appointment. So are you writing one? No.
Yes. So I'll refer to the report that was presented on March 4th. So your council resolution. That council proceed with option to direct appointment by council, no application. To replace the vacant seat,
Yes.
councillor seat.
Everyone good with that resolution? Yes. All right. Well, you've heard the resolution. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Micah, seconded by Councillor Blank. All in favor? Carried. So we will deal with that on April 4th.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have an item under unfinished. Thank you. I actually asked Hillary. Hillary, if you can come up, please. I was very disturbed. Quite a number of, one particular thread on a social media site here in the village. And it was quite extensive with a discussion based on the Bark Lake Mall. It's very hard not to comment on social media, but I thought I'm not going to do that. We're having a council meeting, and I want to clarify a few things for the public because there's clearly a lot of misinformation being put out with respect to the status and of Bark Lake Mall, and with regards to this council being criticized over that, which is completely unfair. And Hillary, I spoke with them about this, and I've asked him to come because I want this clarified for the public record. Because we need to put a stop to rumors. We get criticized on a lot of things, and maybe we deserve it and maybe we don't, but the ones that we don't deserve need to be clarified. So just to recap, I believe, Hillary, you came to us, it might have been either the last week of November, first week of December, somewhere there. You informed council that we could no longer use the shipping container that we refer to as the Bark Lake Mall due to health and safety reasons, correct or not?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
you-
inspected it and I immediately shut it down.
Okay.
But there was a post right after. You still may bring your items. We have a lean-to.
Okay, thank you.
And-
But at that meeting, just to be clear, I believe council, all of us unanimously expressed the fact that we feel that's a very important service that thank you to Hillary, because you came up with it originally, that we all want to see that Bark Lake Mall in operation, and we feel it's extremely beneficial for diversion, for people. It's very actively used and clearly appreciated. So I believe at that same meeting, council directed you to immediately look into purchasing a new container, even though it wasn't budgeted, it would be fine, take it out of reserves, whatever, but it was important that we do that. And now we're into the winter, and you have been looking at that process. So at no time has council said we were not going to have that Bark Lake Mall back open and operational. It is, a container needs to be purchased, and if you could walk us through what needs to be done there, and when we're going to do this, because there's comments being made that council took it away, that somebody has been told by them that we're never putting it back. I mean, this is all total misinformation. So can you please, for the record?
Correct. I don't know how or why this happened this way. I have no reason to use, had 100% support. And Bark Lake Mall, that's all I've heard. It's iconic. It's one of the most famous features we have in this township.
Garbage
It's
is
world
the thing.
renowned. I actually get calls from other municipalities. They're very intrigued with that setup. And you were 100% behind this, and you always were. So it's ordered. I don't know how. And of course, once it comes in, we drag in the other one, drag out the other one. We build a pad, and you can't do that in the winter, obviously.
So I'd like
So
to put emphasis on that it is winter, and we
Yeah.
require appropriate site conditions to be able to do this.
You have to build a pad.
And it
correct?
it has been ordered, correct?
It's ordered. So then we drag out the old one, we dismantle the shelving inside, drag in the new one, and it's a new improved version, the best of the best. It'll be a nice addition, and council was even instrumental when we developed this mall. I had a little contest posed to them. It was a while back, and Councillor Bonnie Mask won because it went around council and said, "What do we name this thing?" And she just blurted out, "Bark Lake Mall." I'll never forget that, as long as I live. And it was a winner. And I got a sign put on, and it is famous. I'll tell you that. And it's going to be better than ever.
Well, it's certainly very, very popular, and I appreciate Councillor Micah bringing it up because there certainly is a lot of interest on Facebook and some comments that are absolutely wrong. So I'm glad you're clarifying it, but council was 100% behind getting it repaired or getting a new container. And you can even see, because I regularly go to Bark Lake, the amount of people and the amount of goods that are still put out under the lean-to. And there are people there regularly looking and checking out what's under there.
Shopping.
So, yeah, shopping, yes.
Yep.
So it'll be a better and
It's a good-
improved department store when we when we open it up.
Correct.
And yeah, so again, appreciate it, and I think the public needs to know that
much so.
we are supporting it 100%, and we will have the situation rectified as soon as possible, and we are not closing it down.
No.
Councillor Schulis.
Yeah, it's you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Hudson Bay is going down, but we're rebuilding it now. No, it's definitely we support this because it's part of that recycling, reusing, and so on, and diversion. Like we don't want those kind of. A lot of the things can be reused. We got to keep it out of the landfill.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
And once it's up on the mound and demolished, squashed, it's gone forever till the eternity. If we can utilize it again, why not?
Councillor Blank.
Yes, thank you. And I did respond to a few people personally regarding some of those same issues. However, I think part of our budget plan for this year was we put money aside in their budget for this year. So anybody in the community that slanders council regarding those things can go ahead and read the minutes and the budget. And we know that we've been working through this with Hillary's been brought up on different occasions since that time to get it done. So thank you.
And what I take from the Facebook page is because Facebook goes all over the map, and you can't really judge anything from it, but you can judge the popularity of that Bark Lake Mall by the number of comments that are coming on it. So it certainly is. I'm glad to hear we will be replacing it as soon as possible because council has always supported it and will continue to. All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
All right, we will then move into an in-camera session. I do have a recommendation that the meeting enter in-camera session at 11:35 to discuss matters pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local employees, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose pursuant to Ontario Municipal Act 2001 C25 S 239 brackets 2 brackets B brackets F. And we have two items, the overtime policy E -01 and legal opinion regarding a council matter. So I need a mover to go into close. Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. All in favor? That's carried. And I will call for And we are back in open session. Brittany, all good?
And it is 12.
And it
14?
is 12:12.
Okay.
12:14.
Thank you.
All right. So we, in closed session, we did deal with the two items that were on the agenda, and we do have a resolution to present.
And thank you through the chair, that council direct the treasurer to continue to apply the overtime on a weekly basis, 35 or 40 hour, not on a daily basis. And that council confirms that vacation, bank, sick time, or statutory holidays is not included in the weekly calculation of hours worked. And that council approves the staff recommendation to implement a callback pay on the work week outside the regular work hours at a minimum of 3 hours. And that policy EO1 be amended, revised, and adopted by bylaw, and staff is directed to communicate implementation of policy EO1 with Public Works, and that these revisions will apply upon passing of the bylaw.
All right, Councillor, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder first. Councillor Micah, second by Councillor Schulis. Any discussion on this? Councillor Blank.
Yes, just when you went to discuss the dates, you mentioned sick day, vacation, banked, and stats. Is the four?
Yes.
Okay, because I think you only read three, so that's why I was wondering.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, it was
Four, thank you.
All right, so any other questions? No. We've all heard the resolution, all in favor, and that's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just have the confirming bylaw. So I do have a recommendation that bylaw 2025-36 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley at the regular council meeting of March 18th, 2025 be read a first, second, and third time and finally pass this 18th day of March 2025. Mover, Councillor Blank, second by Councillor Schulis. All in favor? That's carried. We have a recommendation that council meeting adjourn at 12:17. Could I get a mover, please? Nobody wants to adjourn? Councillor Blank, seconded by Councillor Micah. All in favor? And that's carried. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.